I would say Penn State's proximity. Maybe can they sneak in 2 visits, compared to some of the Southern schools, right? Because they look back at December, right? They didn't sneak them on, but they got him on campus when everybody else was focused on 2024. They got him and Tatsch, who of course committed the other day. So can they somehow maybe get him up early for a spring practice when he has a day off, basketball practice or something like that?
Latest news for Penn State football came out, I believe it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before. Matt Zollers, that quarterback we just talked about, a national prospect at this point. He's down to his top 4 schools: Penn State, Missouri, Georgia, and ironically, after what we just talked about, Pitt is here in his top 4. Fitz, what do you make of this top 4? I know that the top 4s are what they are, but what do you make of this group of schools that Zollers has narrowed this down to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense given where he's been in the last couple of weeks. He went to USF, Florida, Georgia, went to Missouri a couple days later, and then back to Penn State. Pitt is in there. His brother is a walk-on for the Panthers, so they have been present since the start, I believe. If not his first Power 4 offer, one of his first Power 4 offers. So they've had some staying power in there. Georgia, obviously the big one that you look at, but I honestly wouldn't sleep on Missouri either. They've been killing it in terms of the NIL game. They've been very present in a lot more recruitments than you would think. I mean, we kind of live in this bubble. There's the SEC bubble, there's the Big Ten bubble, and Missouri, of course, now in the SEC, but also in the periphery of that SEC bubble. So, people don't really think about Missouri as a threat, but he went down there, liked it from what I understand. And that's going to be a program that is to be reckoned with from an NIL landscape that people probably wouldn't expect. So I think all contenders, to cut it down from that. I mean, I would have expected Florida to be in a top 5, but he decided to lop them off and go with a top 4. So I think all contenders there. Penn State's had him on campus a bunch. They've prioritized him. They've done a lot of things right in his recruitment, but he's going to take the next step. He's going to continue to, go out and see spring visits and things of that nature. Probably, I would think a decision by April, May. Ryan, does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it's not done by the end of April. He almost has to some degree. Look at how wild the last 3-4 weeks have been for him. It's going to be pretty similar in February. I know it's a dead period, but coaches are going to still be contacting him electronically, texts, over the phone, Zooms, all that throughout this month. He's got basketball going on, and Springford went all the way to the semifinals last year in basketball. So that'll go probably, I don't know if they're going to go that far again this year, but they should stretch it throughout most of February and maybe into the beginning of March. And then he's going to have to hit the ground running, probably see as many of those 4 schools again as he can. And I'd be surprised if, sometime around mid-April, he's not ready to get this over with. But, just from talking with him over the last year or two, and then, or not year or two, last couple of months, I should say. And then in recent weeks, after this surge of offers, I know it's weighing on him, I guess, the best way to put it. So yeah, I'd be really surprised if he makes it into June.
And here's a part of what's going on. I think you guys have pointed this out previously. Here are the 2025 industry-ranked quarterbacks for this current cycle. Bryce Underwood, Julian Lewis. These guys, if you notice, as you pointed this out, these are all commits. Antoine Hill, not committed. Hassan Longstreet, that one tripped me up quickly. But you quickly see that we get down to Matt Zollers as one of the few quarterbacks that's left uncommitted in the top 15. So this pressure you're talking about, guys, comes from the teams that don't have a quarterback yet are all trying to get on one of the last trains of these guys that we've evaluated and decided are a part of this top group of quarterbacks. Is that a fair way to put that, Fitz?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's all dominoes all the time when it comes to quarterbacks. So it's not a situation where everybody affects somebody else, but 2 or 3 guys come off the board, that changes everything. If you look at Ryan Montgomery right now in Ohio, Penn State was in his top 5. Ryan and I have always been on this, on the other side of the fence saying he's not coming to Penn State, but South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. So there's some overlap there with Matt Zollers. And then you look at some other quarterbacks in Texas, and then Missouri's in there. Juju Lewis in Georgia is a big I would say, big domino to fall. He's committed to USC, but he was just at Georgia over the weekend, and that's got to be a priority. He is from Georgia, so Georgia doesn't let too many of those guys get away. So when he committed to USC, it was certainly a surprise, but to see him pop up there on campus, not a huge shocker there. So just a little bit of everything, just like one line moving into another, and it's going to affect somebody else. And Zollers is all of a sudden, like, he's one of the hot names. He's one of the 5 hottest quarterbacks in the country right now, just in terms of offers, in terms of visits, in terms of like just general buzz. Penn State was ahead of that, but like there's still a lot to fight against. And that's Georgia in itself. I was just going to try and single out one thing from Georgia, but there's a couple of national championships in the last few years. Yeah. They seem to do a good job of describing that program. Missouri, and then of course the family connection at Pitt. So like there's a lot of things that go into this decision. I'm curious to see how Penn State's 2 quarterback approach, how that has to do with his decision. You can say that it doesn't matter, but Beckham Kritza being there already in the class, I mean, you got to look at that and say, if he wasn't in the class, maybe Zollers is already in. I don't know. That's just me speculating. That's what we do here on a podcast. So it's a very interesting sort of dominoes, but Penn State has prioritized Zollers, I believe.
What, T. Frank, let me add one thing real quick to that. Yeah. Juju Lewis too. He was 2026 and he reclassified to 2025 like 3 weeks ago, and it was right around the same time that Georgia offered Zollers. I think he announced it maybe 2 or 3 days before Zollers, so I'm not sure how much that impacts him specifically. Like from talking to everybody who covers Georgia, like they seem to be very, very interested in Zollers, but also make no mistake, like Lewis is without a doubt Georgia's top guy. So I think that kind of circles back to Missouri maybe as the school to maybe watch a little bit more, because Zollers is well aware that Lewis is going to be someone that Georgia pursues until the very end.
And Missouri, I think, is a good fit for him as well in terms of what they do on offense. I like the way their scheme fits his skills. They're a zone-heavy team. He's athletic. You don't have to kill yourself with a read option because they have a good passing game as well. So there's a lot of things I think Missouri is on the rise in those areas. So when it comes to Penn State, I guess the last question I have here about Matt Zollers and this particular recruiting is looking into the future, not asking you to predict when he commits, where he commits, or any of those things, but what are the things fans should look for in terms of, is it spring visits that are the next thing to set up for Zollers, and how would you read those things if the news comes out when it comes out, Ryan?
I would say Penn State's proximity, maybe can they sneak in 2 visits? Compared to some of the Southern schools, right? Because they look back at December, right? They didn't sneak them on, but they got him on campus when everybody else was focused on 2024. They got him and Tatsch, who of course committed the other day. So can they somehow maybe get him up early for a spring practice when he has a day off, basketball practice or something like that, and then circle back and get him back for the blue-white game? I think that would be maybe a little bit of a sign on where Penn State's trending there. But I would be surprised if he doesn't go back to Georgia and Missouri one more time as well. And Pitt's going to be in the mix too. Again, his brother is currently part of the team.
Yeah, Fitz, same question to you.
I agree. You try and again sneak him up, if you can say that. Like, come up for a visit, just come up during the week or something like that. To get him take a day off at school, get him in the room. I think the thing that I like for Penn State here, in addition to proximity, is we were talking about this guy like well before Penn State offered, and like when he offered, Ryan and I both hit each other up and was like, oh, they went and did the thing. Like, this is a very different recruitment, because you obviously you get to the end of your junior season, then sometimes you get these February offers and January junior day offers and things like that. But they liked him enough when he was not a 4-star, when he was not a guy that was on the national radar, to offer him. And that goes back to Danny O'Brien. I mean, O'Brien, I think, has been the guy that's been around him the longest, and he's sticking on the staff, and they're trying to figure out the ways to make him stick long term here. And I think that's another thing in terms of proximity, is the fact that they've been here the entire time as a target, not just as a guy they've been stringing along, but a guy that they've had as a target. I mean, I was talking about Malik Washington for the longest time, and it seems like Zollers has, I don't want to say clearly moved ahead of him, but pretty clearly moved ahead of him in terms of the priority there. So the very interesting look into the thought process there for Penn State. But like, when we were talking about guys that we're targeting, because I remember I wrote this story back in October about the guys that they're targeting at quarterback, and Zollers was one of those, even though he didn't have an offer. I think that says a lot about what they've thought of him the entire time, and I think he's felt that that sort of respect that they've given him.
Ryan, one last question for you. Actually, no, I'm going to come to you about Junior Day a lot. So, Fitz, I want to come back to you with this question. Ethan Grunkemeyer last year had a meteoric rise up into being a top 10 quarterback. Zollers already is in that territory. I think we just saw he was 14th in the industry rankings. Do you think he has the ability to move into the top 10? Do you think his skills and his frame and talent and tools all are that of a guy who could be in a similar situation at the end of this recruitment?
I do. I think this is a guy that's really moved up, and he's done it like on with the tape on the field. It hasn't been a situation where he went out and threw great in shorts and t-shirt and did some things like that. But he's been able to show his versatility, and this is another reason I think Missouri is like a legitimate threat here. I think he's a great fit for what they do, and Missouri I don't think gets enough credit in terms of what they do offensively. But they've been one of the more consistent offenses in college football, and it's been kind of fun to watch. Fun to watch whenever they come on my TV. But yeah, I think he's done it in pads. He's got the size to back it up. This is not a kid that's coming in on a visit that's 6'3" and leaves at 6'1". Like he's got a lot of those things where you check those boxes, and the athleticism certainly there. So you just really like the entire package. And I think when you look at him, you see a top 10 quarterback, but playing at spring forward, which is not going to get the respect that a lot of these guys are going to get playing at the bigger schools, is probably something that probably would have held him up. I'm very curious to see what would happen if he was in the last cycle. Like, we didn't discover as a whole Ethan Grunkemeyer until the spring evaluation period, and they got out there and say, oh, this kid's pretty good. I think you can see that like on an accelerated timeline with Matt Zollers, and you can see it in the tape. And I think that's the big thing that sets him apart, is that he's done it in pads.
T. Frank, let me add one more thing real quick. It's like the opposite of Grunk, right? Like Grunk, his rise was because of camps and seeing his technique and all those little things, where Zollers was more so the film. So I think that speaks well to Zollers' opportunity to move up, because he's going to get a shot at at least Elite 11 regional camp, and if he makes it to the finals, that'll get him an opportunity in front of all those scouts to see all those little things that, Charles prioritizes, like we talk about arm strength and all those little things, but it's more so footwork. And I'm not a quarterback guru, but
just to chip in here, some of the things I saw and I put in his advanced scouting is the throwing motion, his rotational throwing, his ability to throw accurately off platform. He has a throw on there where he doesn't have either of his feet in the ground, like a Jordan Love style throw. That's going to do very well. I think you make the comparisons talking about the recruiting timeline of these two guys, but I think the talent style of Ethan Grunkemeyer and Matt Zollers are fairly similar as well. So it'd be interesting to see how all of this progresses in the summer.